Good morning, everyone. I wish you a very happy Holi. I hope you had a great Holi, and I hope and wish you'll have a colorful year ahead.
Same to you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so in the last class, we have discussed about a naive class. So basically, we discussed about the text classification in general and how it can be useful in information retrieval. We have discussed, and we discussed some of the classification technique like naive Bayes and k nearest neighbors classification and the vector space classification we have discussed. So further, there are some additional topics which might be useful. So like decision tree and probably the how the decision tree classifier works, and it can basically work in text classification in general. So given that we have to cover some of the other important topics related to information retrieval, I will be skipping this part, but this has been already been covered hopefully by some of the TAs who have taken basically the introductory ML session, as well as you might have covered decision tree in your uh, other ML and probably SML classes. So I skipped that part. So if you want, you can quickly have a look over this. So given the interest of time, and we have probably very few classes are left, so I would like to cover today the distributed word representation and how it can be useful in the information retrieval. So without any further delay, we can get started. So, but before we proceed further, can anybody somehow highlight what was the issue with the previous word representation before the distributed word representation? And why do we need distributed representation?
So, like existing word representations like one word or bag of words, either they are sparse or they do not consider word order. So, basically, like there is no way to capture semantics or how one word affects the other relation between words.
Very, very nice. Yeah, very nice and very accurately mentioned. So the previous representation, like the bag of word model, basically they are sense kind of one hot vector, right? So and they are very sparse because if you're going, and usually the vector size is fairly very large because the vector size depends on what is the vocabulary size you have, and usually the vocabulary size, the dictionary size that you have is quite huge, right? If you're going to represent a vector with such a long representation, firstly it is sparse because usually the for a document probably only very a few tokens will be there in that case. And similarly, if you're representing a word, I think it is going to be very sparse because how many document it has appeared. So that's why, I mean, we need to think of probably a better representation, and in that direction we'll be discussing today. So let's have a very quick overview. So how can we basically more robustly match a user search intent? When we say the search intent, so how you are representing the user's intent in terms of query, right? And can you represent the user's intent very accurately or exactly through the query? So as we discussed in the, I mean, many of the earlier classes, it is very difficult, right? I mean, it's very difficult to, and that's why there is a kind of uh, there is a uh, there is a kind of bridge. There is basically kind of semantic gap, or you can say the intent gap between what user is looking for and probably what you represent from the query. Because if the query is not exactly what you're looking for, in that case it also depends on what kind of document you'll be retrieving in response to the given query may not be accurate. And often an intent can be represented in many ways, right? whatever the users need is can be represented in many ways. But if you represent a query, because your query is just one, right, which is you're translating from user's intent to the query. If this given query doesn't consider all possible ways of representing an intent of the user, then probably you're not going to get accurate result. So that's why we need to consider that. So for example, we want to understand a query which is not just probably a string. So if you are going to do just a kind of string matching, it is not going to. So like in this case, you can see if a user searches for Dell notebook battery size. So I believe uh, it is the way probably the user has written it, but probably he may also mean not by the battery size, but by the battery capacity, right? Because sometimes it might be the size as well, the length of the battery, but in many cases, I mean, probably they mean the capacity as well. So that is the intent gap many times you see, which you have to fulfill. You have to basically bridge them in order to provide the user probably the accurate information which he is looking for. Another example you can think of, if the user searches for simple model, right? So here basically would like to match the documents containing Seattle hotel as well, right? The motel and hotel semantically they are similar, right? And in a way, I mean, your the document that you are representing, returning for the given query should also consider that. And if you are just doing a kind of string matching like motel with only motel, it might be the case you miss many good hotels, which was probably also very semantically similar, and that basically is not going to help user. So that's why we need a better way. We need a better way to basically fill this gap. So as you can see here, so a pure keyword based matching information retrieval system is not going to help here, because here sometimes it is context, sometimes probably it's a synonym, sometimes probably it is other context word. So we need to basically think of several solutions. So simple solution could be, how about you consider spelling correction? Because for example, though the motel is also correct thing, but uh, how about it might be due to some spelling mistakes. So motel and hotel are very similar if we probably remove this. Another thing could be, how about you consider the stemming and probably the case folding. So for example, if we have discussed earlier, right? So playing and probably the play is semantically exactly the same thing. But if you are going to consider the pure keyword based matching, it is not going to match. In that case, the stemming and probably other techniques you can follow. So here basically would like to basically better understand when query and document matches, what all other things you have to consider beyond the pure keyword based matching. So one solution is the query expansion, how you can do the query expansion, and what are all kind of query expansion you can think of, anyone? Suppose for a information need, you represent the information in terms of query and you get some response, which is probably not very accurate, which you're looking for. What are the other query expansion?
So we could take synonyms.
Synonyms, very nice, very nice. What else you can do? Synonyms is very right answer in that direction. What else? Anyone?
So more sophisticated method would be to take semantically related terms like represent the given vector as a query
Exactly.
and other terms. And
Yeah, so kind of, I mean, sometimes probably the two words are not synonyms which you're looking for, but probably very relevant, right? So as you're referring, so kind of context will also play a very important role. And so usually the query expansion is done based on the relevance feedback. So relevance feedback could basically allow you to capture this if we get not, I mean, the near enough to match document with these words or not. So as you rightly mentioned, we may have considered some kind of thesaurus, so of synonyms for a query expansion. So despite you might have used probably the motel, so you can also consider the other synonyms for that, like hotel, or probably the lodge, or probably many other things you can think of. So we need to basically have some kind of a measure of word similarity that basically help you in calculating from a big document collection, or probably calculating from a query log mining. So because often the word similarity can be determined based on, I mean, a good number of collection of document that you have, and how they have basically come together, and often not only in terms of document but often in terms of query. So for example, you type something, right? So one possibility here, you first write probably Seattle motel and you did not get any results. So what you do, what is the immediate thing you can do? Probably what you'll do, you change your query. So that is you change itself rather than probably the IR system had helped you. So you change probably the Seattle motel to Seattle hotel. In that case you start getting. So in a way, we such kind of query log will also help you determine what are the basically the intent gap between the query representation and the information need, and how the user changes the query or update the query in order to get the exact answer. So the next option is the query. After the query expansion is the document expansion. So something similar you can do here as well, right? So you can use some kind of anchor text, which basically may help you in providing human authored synonyms, which you can probably add, and accordingly you can get it. So this is one of the example. You can see the PubMed. So here basically the probably you're looking for the word articles, probably the cancer, and neoplasm is something which is also very related to the cancer, or probably the cells related to cancer, and accordingly it can be added and give you the corresponding results. So as we mentioned, like the query log can also help you. So context free query expansion ends up probably the problematic, because if you don't know the context, so it just query expansion is not going to help you. So the context plays a very important role if you want to probably improve your overall information retrieval based results. So like the wet ground here is kind of equivalent to wet earth, because here we are talking about the ground, or probably the earth you have. So you can expand here ground to probably the ground earth. You can add the synonym here, but this may not be applicable to probably in other contexts where probably you are using the ground coffee. It may not be accurate to have earth coffee. So it depends on the context. So this is one example. You can think of many other example where sorry, where basically context can help you. So synonyms and the context are, you can say, are the key to important, uh, you can say, the components which can help you in further getting the distributed word representation, which consider both context as well as the synonyms. So you can basically learn query context specific rewriting from search log by attempting to identify the same user making second attempt to the same user need. So this is the example I was giving earlier, right? So here basically user basically writes Seattle motel, and later on in the same context, because the person is looking for probably the hotels in Seattle or something. So in that case, or probably the places to live near the Seattle. So he changes probably the motel to hotel and so on. So in this way, basically, since you are not only considering the word, but you are also considering all the probably the context around that. So in a way, now you are, instead of considering just vector of the word, you are also considering the words around that. So in a way, you are considering some kind of embedding. So that's why it's called word embedding, because now the representation is not only the words at hand, but also probably the words surround the word, right? So in that way, you can consider the embedding, which probably give a better representation for the given. So as rightly mentioned by Venkatesh earlier, so here the thesaurus basically can help you in improving the overall information retrieval system. So one possibility, how about we generate the automatic thesaurus generation? So it's basically attempt to generate a thesaurus automatically by analyzing the collection of document that you already have. So often if this particular word has come, so these are the other synonyms which might have people use. So fundamental notion is how to find the similarity between two words, and you can define the similarity in two ways. So first is two words are similar if they occur with similar words often, right? So this is one word. You can say the similarity of the two. Second is how about the two words are similar if they occur in the given grammatical relation with the same word. So if the same word, they follow probably the same grammatical relation. So this is another way. Probably you can say both words are similar. So these are the two direction, or probably the two ways of doing so. So both has its pros and cons. So for example, if you're focusing on the co-occurrence, right? Since it's a co-occurrence, so here basically it's more robust because you have a collection of good number of documents. You can find out the probability and so on. So it can help you, despite probably the some words probably may have less occurrence, some word may have more occurrence, but at least you see a wider coverage of different word similarity that you have. In case of grammatical relations are more accurate, so here basically often it is the fixed relation that you're looking for, if the word present, if it is there, if not. So accordingly, that will be more accurate, but may not be that much robust because it don't consider all possible cases. So in a way, these are the two ways, and people use different approaches in order to generate this. So let's talk about the simple co-occurrence based thesaurus. So here basically you have a term document incidence matrix. So you can see these are the terms, these are the document that you have. So you can normalize the weight here for this particular entries for all. So the simplest way to compute one is the best on term incidence matrix, because once you consider the terms to terms incidence matrix, it will indicate you so which term has appeared with which another terms. So this basically you can do by computing this A transpose, because if you're going to compute A transpose, you will get it. Okay, so which terms has appeared with which other terms, and accordingly the higher C values indicates probably, yeah, so this will having the higher co-occurrence numbers. So these are some automatically generated thesaurus. For example, for absolutely whatsoever, totally, exactly, nothing, I mean all these are nearest neighbor of words which came around using this. So these are the example you can see. So if some person is using the word absolutely in their query, so you can also look for the documents by replacing or considering absolutely with probably these words, and in this way you can basically you can consider the other possibility, or kind of bridging the gap between the way you represent the query and what is the information need of the person. So kind of filling that intent gap by expanding the query by considering all these uh, possible uh, queries for in the given terms, or even you can expand the document as we have discussed. So often, so this is one of the ways you can do so, but one of the major limitation I hope you can see. So if despite you consider very little data, so for example you consider just tens of millions of words, if you're going to consider the matrix C, that is A transpose A, in that case, the number of entries will be 10 per 10, right? That is two sparse. And if the matrix is going to be two sparse, it is probably not feasible for you, and it may not be the efficient way of dealing with such kind of distributed representation. So in that case, what else can be done? How can we then represent the term relation, right? So with the standard symbolic encoding of the term, each term is kind of dimension. So different terms have no inherent similarity. So if this is so, what are the ways we can do? So like in this case, we were giving the example of motel, we are giving the example of hotel. So since different terms here, as you can see here, are in different dimensions. So each term is its own dimension in the vector space. So for example, motel probably appeared only in this document, and probably the hotel appeared, I mean, even suppose you are considering the number of document or so. So here basically the hotel is represented by this. So if you have two such vectors, right? So if you find the similarity between these two, it is going to be 0. So despite they are related, despite they are similar, if we are going to compute the similarity using just you can say the this way, it is going to be give no similarity, which is not accurate, right? So you can think of, instead of, if we having such representation, if we have the distributed representation, in that case probably the similarity won't be coming to 0, and hopefully it will come to be coming to be a high number as compared to probably a motel. If you compute the similarity with, say, for example, door. So if a query on hotel and probably the document has motel, then our query and documents are orthogonal here. So this is which are representing. So we, in order to solve that, as I mentioned, so we need to consider some kind of thesaurus, kind of term-to-term similarity. So earlier, what you're doing in basic IR, what you're doing, scoring was QTD. So that is you're just taking the transpose of query and the document, you and consider this. And in this case, whatever the score which is coming out to be, that is the ranking of the document for the given query. But now this representation don't consider the thesaurus, that is the synonyms, right? Or probably the term-to-term similarity, the context. How you can do so? You can do so by introducing W in between. So W will be the kind of the parameters which help you to learn, okay, so what is the similarity between the different words that you have, different tokens that you have. And overall computing by this, you can basically have the information retrieval ranking, and accordingly you can determine, okay, so despite this given query, this is the document, this is the score it has. So for more details, you can refer to the papers by query translation model, but the overall idea is this, right? So earlier you just consider the query and the document. Now you also consider the context somehow in between. So again, the problem here is this W may be quite huge, right? So despite it solve the problem, it gives the context, but since it is quite huge, it may not be computationally feasible, or at least efficient. Is there any better way? Is there any better way you can solve this problem? So the idea is, can we learn a dense low dimensional representation? So when we say the dense low dimensional representation, we are mean, so now the vector size will be, vector length will be quite less as compared to the earlier. So earlier, suppose we in the bag of words model, the vector size usually is, say, the dimension size of the dictionary, that is, say, million, or probably several million, or probably several thousand. But since it was introducing sparsity, how about we just consider a small vector length and make sure that no entries are 0, or probably at least as dense as it can be. So in this case, can we learn a dense low dimensional representation of the word, such as you are aware of word to wake, or probably glove or something, right? So where basically every word now you'll be representing in a dimension of, say, 300, or probably 500, or probably something around that. So basically that so that basically this representation of dense low dimensional representation of a word in RD. So here basically D is a dimension in real number, such that the dot product of UTV basically express word similarity. If this dot product is very high, it means the similarity is quite high. If not, then probably it is a bit low. And we could basically still, if you want to consider the translation or probably the context we are talking about, so here basically now you only need to consider probably the cross language probably the most important word that you are considering. So in this way basically you can still use W in case of whenever you still really need them, and but now this W will be quite small as compared to the in the order of 10 power 10 or probably more, so which is probably computationally feasible now too. So we can basically use supervised semantic indexing, and that has shown that the successful use of learning W for the information retrieval. So uh, I will show you probably the further how we can develop what is, but overall idea is we need to consider the dense vector and the probably of low dimension, so that it will be probably help you in getting rid of this uh, zero that you are getting earlier, to probably get some real numbers instead of all zeros that you have in the vectors. And when you compute the similarity, this similarity won't be coming to zero now, but probably some real number which will be more accurate. So that's why we need to consider some kind of distributional similarity based on representation, and how you can represent, since we know a person is known by its company, right? Similar hypothesis has been given for the word as well, right? You shall know a word by the company it keeps. So if you know the word company it keeps, then probably you can represent the word by the neighboring words they have. So this is one of the most successful ideas in the modern statistical NLP, and that help you basically getting the distributional similarity based on uh, the not only the target word or probably the word under the consideration, but also its neighboring words. So this is the example you can see. So here basically the word banking appears into the different contexts and probably the different neighboring word. So now if you have to represent the banking, you are going to not only consider the probably the banking now, like which all document has appeared, but also the other words which are there. So any question until here? Okay, so it seems not good. So solution is as we were referring. So we need to have some kind of low dimensional vector. So the number of topics that people talk about is small. The reasoning is something derived from this. So because for example, if the word motel is there, right? So despite your dictionary size is say 1 million, you're not going to consider all 1 million words uh, at a given time, right? To consider a word. So often we are going to only consider the the words or probably which are basically make some sense, or probably at least has been used in the whatever the document you already have. So like in this case, for considering the banking, you can consider basically the words around this instead of considering all the words in the dictionary. So this is something it's making sense, because also as a human, what is the working memory of human? Anyone? If you have taken some classes on SCI, how many words or at least event you can remember at a time in your working
I
memory?
think there are 4 slots, sir, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it says that there's only a limited number of information that we can hold in our working memory, and in the long-term memory, it takes time overall.
Exactly.
So I think there are 4 slots, basically 4 things that we can remember at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can think of as like magic number 9 again. So there are research which say that this is not the, you can say, this is not the exact number. Again, it depends on the context, right? Because some contexts which are easier, something which is easier or probably recent, you may probably remember more as compared to probably which some topics is, so for example complex. For example, you are a computer science student, I will ask you to read and probably a research paper on medical domain, right? You may not able to probably, you recall 9. I'm not sure, right? It may be probably less, it may be probably 9, but at least whatever the research they have proposed is more, you can say, the generic observation they have found. And that is something similar here. So again, here I don't mean that we need to consider 9 words, but at least we mean that there are limited words the memory, or probably the anyone can process. So here, that's why the number of topics that people talk about is small in this sense. So for example, any topic about movie, politics, or probably cricket and so on. So we need to basically consider the a few most important information in a fixed or probably small number of dimension, and we call it dense vector. So usually in case of word embedding, I mean, these are around 300, 500, or probably 700 something, depends on what kind of embedding you're using. So that's why people have mentioned, so usually they're in the range of 25 to 1000 dimension, and that would be good enough. That would be good enough to probably get your work done, as compared to probably in a better way as compared to the normal word embedding methods. So the next question is how now we are going to reduce the dimension, given that, I mean, the earlier the vector size is in the size of the distance, which is maybe in millions. How you are going to reduce? So we have to go from basically big sparse co-occurrence count vector to probably low dimensional word embedding. How we can achieve that? So traditional way is consider the latent semantic indexing and probably analysis. Have you studied about LSA? Anyone? Anyone in mathematics studied LSA? Okay, not any problem. So basically, it uses the singular value decomposition, SVD. So even at least the people who have studied or probably going to study the recommendation system, they're going to use SVD a lot actually. So at least those who have any interest in recommendation, just go into more details about LSI, LSA, and probably this SVD. So it's basically very similar to the PCA. So if you recall, in the last class we discussed about feature importance, right? So it is similar to the PCA for an arbitrary rectangular matrix, so that you can have just like random projection to find the low dimensional basis of the orthogonal. So if I give you just an example how it works, so what it does, it decomposes a vector in such a way that so usually, I mean, the entries in a matrix usually are sparse, right? I mean, there are some zero, I mean, the zero are probably the non-zero values scattered across the matrix, right? So what SVD does, SVD tries to basically on the, you can say the, on the top left side, suppose this is the matrix, suppose this is the matrix, I don't know how we can use notation. Yeah, suppose this is some kind of matrix, right? So it has probably all the zero non-zero values around this. So what it does, it try to probably move most of the non-zero values in the top this corner, and the rest zero values around this. So in that case, now you do not need to consider a whole matrix, but probably mainly consider that, you can say, the top left side, and it is based on the these values you can take a call which are importance feature, and probably in this way you can basically get rid of and usually how people traverse this value, if you recall, usually people traverse these values like this, right? So it's kind of easier for them to probably traverse these values and get it done, and just remove or probably throw away the zero values around this area. So you can get more details when you going to study the SVD, and I strongly recommend the people working in the recommendation system to check about it. Okay, so you can actually basically by doing LSA, you can basically noise of term variation gets replaced by the semantic concept. So here semantic concept is more about how you can get the important parts of given representation that you have. So the next solution is probably the next solution is neural embedding. So the word embedding, word meaning is basically different in terms of vector, as we said. So how about rather than representing banking with 0001 and probably 0000, how about we represent them in terms of some real numbers, how we can represent them in terms of some real numbers of some dimension. It's basically, you can see it's kind of dense representation now, and probably the vector size is small. So it's basically dense, low dimensional vector representation, which we were talking about. How we can achieve this? So this is the visualization you have. So basically you have whole words probably around the vector space that you have. So if you see probably the few words, you can see kind of the word is kind of clustered, or probably the grouped around that. So like these groups, these set of words are grouped together, these group of words probably grouped together, these are probably, so in a way it gives an indication if the two words are a bit far, so it means they may have semantically much different as compared to the probably two words here in the probably the same group. So these are some visualization for the same. You can see here, so like Iraq, Israel, probably the Russia, France, Japan, London, and so on. So these are the you can say Germany, France, mostly the country name, and they are grouped together. Similarly, if you see probably the other groups, so like in this case here, so national, united, international. So these are some semantically similar words. So like here, British, Russian, German. So here we are talking more about the nationalities, right? So British, Japanese. So we are talking about the nationalities. So parliament, election. So these are related, right? So parliament and election is probably come together. And similarly, you can think of more examples here, like expect, think, say, or probably are, is, were, and probably it's more like the words that you have. Similarly, like had, has, haven't, being, and come, go, and so on. So these are basically the way basically you can visualize the word similarity, and using and leveraging basically these words similarity. We need to come up with a kind of dense low dimensional vector representation. How you can do so? So we define a word model. We define a model that aims to predict between a center word WT, that is this word you have to compute the similar word embedding, and the context words in terms of word vectors. So these are the context, like the words which has come around. So we need to we need to have a loss function basically here in such a way, if any neighboring word around this, you need to basically consider them by minimizing this loss function. So we look at many positions t in a big language corpus. So for example, this is the word we are talking about. We'll see where all these words has appeared in other documents. So we keep adjusting the vector representation word to minimize the loss. So this will be more clear by probably the coming slides. So earlier, how it works? So basically they learned the representation by doing some back propagation error, but now later the people started using neural probabilistic language model. So basically these are non-linear and probably slow. So recently people started with the fast and probably bilinear models like Word2Vec and the GloVe. So Word2Vec is one of the very popular word embedding models proposed by Mikulo in 2003 from Google. So they have basically used this very simpler and probably faster model to represent a word in a vector space. And similarly, so in this case here, it is based on the context, like which word has probably before the given word, which words are probably coming after the word. And I will show quickly how it can be done. Second is word representation is called GloVe model. So that is from the Stanford, and it basically connects back to the matrix factorization, because it is based on the, you can say, the global co-occurrence statistics, like which are the two words most oftenly come together, which are the two words probably right? Accordingly, these statistics you can represent the glove in similar fashion, like probably in the similar dimension as word2vec. So where the dimension size, for example, it would be 300, it would be dense, and so on. So now we have the advanced representation. So that is the per token. So we have like Elmo, ULM-fit, BERT, and now the Robert, and many other advanced contextual word representation are there, which has shown the significant improvement in the previous techniques. So regarding word2vec, word2vec is predict between every word and its context words. So there are two algorithms through which you can do so. I strongly recommend, at least who have, in fact, you might have already gone through this paper. So any person who has interest in NLP, any person who has interest in data science, at least go through this very interesting paper from Mikolo, how the word2vec has been designed. So there are two algorithms. One is the skipgram, another is the CBOG, that is the CBOW, that is continuous bag of words model. So in case of skipgram, so it predicts context word given target, and it is position independent. In case of continuous bag of word model, basically you consider, so predict target words from the bag of words of context that you already have. So like how what will be the next word would be, what are the second next word would be, and so on. So you consider a window in this case, and using this window you help. So there are several ways you can train the method. So one is like hierarchical softmax, negative sampling, and the basically the naive softmax. So in case of word2vec, again, so these the continuous bag of words, and negative sampling is one of the popular way through which you can generate the word embedding. So I strongly recommend to read this paper from Mikolo and his team, which has basically changed the way NLP was doing. So there were time basically. So after the introduction of glove and probably the word2vec, probably the other word embedding techniques, all the works in NLP started using this, and they have shown significant improvement in their result. So you can amazing that in all the top NLP conference, there were no paper. In fact, I won't say no, but at least there are majority of the papers were using this word embedding techniques to show, okay, so earlier they were using this representation, and after using this, they have shown significant improvement in the result. So it has definitely changed overall discourse about word similarity and NLP. So this is the skipgram I was talking about. So you have the context word. So these are probably the some words before and after. So you consider a kind of window, like in this case 2. So outside context word in window of size 2, and so on. And accordingly, you can basically compute the probability here, P T plus J, given that the WT is the word you're talking about. And they try to basically minimize this objective function. So so here basically they have the objective function, that is basically also called the cost or loss functions. So in this case, you compute this J theta. Theta is probably the parameter that you are, all the parameter or the variable you want to optimize, and you can basically compute this. You can compute this probability log of this. So given that the WT is already given to you, so what are the other context word that you have, and that you can compute the probability with all the examples that you have. So in a way, by minimizing this objective function, you can maximize the predictive accuracy, and this is the way the word2vec has been trained. So the question is how now you can compute this probability. So you can compute this probability using this formula. So given that probably the C is the center word, O is probably the context word you have, you can compute this using this exponential formula. So it nothing but basically does a dot product of the to compare the similarity of two words, that is the O, the context word, and probably C, the center word that you have. And in this way basically you can compute the softmax, and the softmax basically gives the probability of the given word. And here the softmax basically It is called softmax because the maximum you amplify the probability of the largest xi, that is the word you're talking about, and probably the soft because still assign some probability to smaller x. So for more details of this word work, I again recommend to read the Mikolos paper, which has, in fact, the Mikolos first paper was written in such a way that was a bit complex. Then there is a number of papers and probably the blogs has been published to explain, or you can say the simplify whatever the all probabilities and probably all the mathematical formula they have used in their paper. So it's very interesting paper. You should have a look. So this is just the representation. Here basically you have the center word, you have the context word, and using that basically you try to compute the representation of the distributed representation of the word. Okay, so so to learn good word vectors, so compute all vector gradients. So here the vector gradients mainly referring to how you can basically come up with the a d-dimensional vector and v many words, that is you are considering the context in such a way that when you optimize this parameter, this will give you the best, you can say, the representation of the word. So when two words are similar, then they are computing their similarity using their vectors will give you the high similarity score. So this is something you are willing to do, and in order to optimize, basically they have basically considered this contour. So basically using this contour, what they are trying to do, they try to basically consider the derivative of the function so that they can reach to the optimal parameters. So specifically they have used the derivative, because in this way basically they have performed the gradient descent, and one of the popular gradient descent that people use is the SGD, that is stochastic gradient descent. So in this way, so this is the the new value you have that you achieve by from the old value that you had, and probably the delta values that you have, the delta gradient that you have moved. So basically it's try to do something like this. So earlier probably you were somewhere here, and after the gradient descent, you can slightly consider the slope and move slightly further, and accordingly you can see how basically the value changes. Like in this case you can see here, so so fx that you are considering here is x power 4 minus 3 x power 3 plus 2. So in order to perform a gradient descent, what you do, you consider its derivative. Derivative of this would be 4 of x cube minus 9x squared, and using this basically for the different x and epsilon values, like how much gradient, what is the step size that you have, you can basically compute this value, and you can probably reach to a local minimum, and where basically you can up, you can basically reach to the optimal value. So this is the stochastic gradient I was talking about. So you can have the theta in such a way, you can move from one parameter, probably from one point to another on the method that you have, and accordingly you can get the new parameters. So this is the way you can think, you can achieve. So often you may need to apply probably the composite function, like you need to compute y of fu, where yu is nothing but again a g of x. So in order to achieve the gradient for this, you can basically break that, kind of perform some kind of chain rule. So dy by dx would be dy by du and du by dx, and accordingly you can compute this. So similarly, for given this example, you can compute the gradient, or probably how much you need to probably move accordingly by computing the dy by dx, and accordingly you can compute this. So this is again the representation visualization we can think of, and that is, and one of the very interesting thing which has been which has been realized after the inception of word embedding. So people have seen that given this set of words, so you know, 1 plus 1 is same as, not same, I would say, uh, uh, I can say that 3 minus 1 is same as 4 minus 2, right? So it means you can perform some analogy or mathematical function over the numerical values that you have, right? So similarly, you can think of whatever the analogy you can perform in mathematics. Can you apply the same analogy here on these words you have? Anyone? I mean, will that be will that be possible? Because if that would be possible, then it will be very interesting to see, right? Especially in terms of similarity, in terms of getting which are you want to consider in the context. So do you think it is possible to perform all the analogies that you do in mathematics here, especially like addition, deletion, and so on? Anyone? So let me show you the example, by the way, first. So for example, uh, so there is basically linear, the Mikolov basically they have explained in their paper. They observed the linear relationship in the vertebrae. So what do you mean by linear relationship? So these representation are very good at encoding similarity and the dimensionality of the same. So whatever the analogy they have performed. So for example, apple and apples. Hopefully it's just difference of singular to plural. So it will be approximately equal to car minus cars, that is singular minus plural. Similarly, family minus families. It could be again, so man minus man, and so on. So this is about the analogy they have mentioned. So another one of the most popular example you might have seen, that king minus man is same as, not same, I would say the similar as queen minus woman. Do you think, I mean, such kind of analogy is possible before, or at least now, in natural language processing? Anyone? Have you used this analogy before? At least anyone?
So we can use for localization, for example, like certain text like which has been pre-trained on large corpus. Like if we sometimes subtract the geographic areas, I have observed that we can localize the names. It does not work at all times, but that is also one useful feature.
Right, right. Similarly, I mean, in a way, basically, it's not just semantically, but there are many ways, because if you are able to perform the mathematical operation like this, it will basically help you in do anything in the embedding space that you have. So since you have the vector representation, you just do the subtraction, and you can tell, okay, so since the difference between these two, for example, if I do apple minus apple, right, it will be 0, right? Because it's the same. Similarly, you can perform the similar analogy in, if you recall, I was referring the example of country name and probably the citizenship, like Japan and Japanese. Similarly, India and probably India. So the distance between these two would be the same. So using the same word analogy, you can do here. So man, woman. Then what do you think would be the answer here? Anyone? So man, woman. If we have this analogy, if you have a king here, then what will be the value here? What will
Queen.
be the,
Queen. Queen.
yes, you're right. And we can justify this analogy using this, right? So on the vector space, you have man and woman. If you have a king here, so the queen will be hopefully somewhere here, and that will be justified by computing the values you can do. So using this analogy that you have just discussed in last slide. So if you do this, right, because you want to find this, right, this will be basically king plus woman minus man, and that will coming to be something like this. And this is nothing but in the vector space is around queen, and that basically justify this. So here basically you do nothing but you try to maximize over all the possible words that you have around this, given that the uh, words you have A B C D here, and accordingly you can get it. So Mikolo basically again examined and probably explained this in their word analogy in his paper, in their paper, and it's very interesting paper to at least see. So this is something similar visualization has been observed using the glove word embedding. So in the glove, basically, this is another word embedding methods, uh, almost similar to similar popular, I can say in some context, glove is performing better. In some context, what you wake is performing better. But at least both are quite popular. So in this, the benefit of this is that since this is based on the global co-occurrence based statistics, this is faster to compute. And they have basically shown the very similar representation. So like in this case, you have the company and probably the CEO relationship. Similarly, you have superlatives relationship like slow, slower, slowest. It will be similar to the short, shorter, shortest, strong, stronger, strongest, and probably the clear, louder, and probably the loudest. Sorry, so clear, clearer, and clearest. So it has huge applications in information retrieval, in because that help you in dealing with the first problem we have discussed in the slide in the today's class. I mean, how about we write motel and hotel? So do you think now the motel and hotel will be probably closer in the vector space here, right? Because you are considering the context, you are considering the co-occurrence matrix. Uh, so that will basically help you to deal with such context issues that somehow was not possible earlier. So, so this is one of the again popular paper in WWW. So improving document ranking with dual word embedding. So after word embedding, the people have come up with a different, you can say the improved embedding. So like after this, they have come up with like dual embedding. So these are the papers you can think of, and they basically builds on BM25 about aboutness, and accordingly they have basically updated their embeddings. So you have two documents here. Accordingly, you can do. So I won't go into the details of this, but if you want, you can have a look. So this is how the dual embedding space they have used. So I skip this part. So again, for the experiment, they have shown that they have achieved a quite high improvement. I mean, their score were quite better. So that's how you can see here. So like in this case, they were NDCG. So if you recall, NDCG is the evaluation metric we use when we have to consider the ranking order of the items returned by the system. So that's why we have computed NDCG, and often it is uh, quite you can say the uh, normal practice, or you can say the popular practice. The people consider the NDCG at 1 to, I mean, at different numbers, NDCG at k, similar to the people do at precision at k, recall at k, and so on. The people also compute the NDCG k accordingly. So can anyone answer why do we need to compute at k, be it like precision at k or NDCG at k and so on? Anyone? how the @k help? Yeah, Venkatesh.
So because like there could not be just one relevant results, but multiple relevant results, and like we basically want to judge that out of all the recommendations, like how many are really relevant to the end user, how many would be converted to clicks or usage.
Yeah. And secondly, I mean, secondly, you can also treat it like way. There are many applications which is very sensitive, right? There are many applications which is very sensitive. For example, if you're building IVR system, right? IVR cannot just go into top 10 and play all 10, right? For example, Alexa. Alexa can automatically just read the first response it gives, right? The first time. So like, for example, in case of real-time communication, or you can say the interaction, at the rate 1 is most important, right? Where probably there is very, very less, or you can say there is no human intervention, right? So where basically it simply have to focus on @k. They don't worry about what are the 2 or 3 or probably the 10th line. It also depends on the applications. And so if it is real time, if it is automatic, it's probably @1 makes more sense as compared to others. So these are some overall ranking and of the results. And these are some additional slides. So in the interest of time, I'll skip here, I'll stop here. And this is summary of this. So word embeddings are the hot new technology, and you at least you should go through it. You should probably go into much greater detail. So I'm sure, I mean, the Abhishek and probably the Rahul, while taking the introduction to NLP and introduction to machine learning, at least they also might have gone into some details of this. So with this, I stop here, and now we can go for presentations. So which group will be presenting today? Please tell your name.
Hello, sir. Yeah, one of the group will be ours. That is team 12. Yes, sir.
We are also on to do.
So Meet, should I make you the co-host? You'll be sharing the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So after Meet, who want to go next?
Sir, me, Pallav and Avinav.
Okay, Pallav. Yeah, so Pallav, I make you co-host.
Sir, we also have it scheduled for today, I guess.
No, you not. Okay, so what's the name?
Harsh, group 42.
So should I make you co-host?
Yes, sir. We presented last.
Okay, so Harsh, I made you co-host. So we can get started with Meet and group, then Pallav, and finally Harsh and group. So get start. Thanks.
Yes, sir. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, just to ask, is the screen blinking for you all also?
Yes. No, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, Anjali, you can start.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Myself is Anjali Singh, and our presentation topic is MIR for vocalized melody. Next slide, please.
So just for everyone's reference, I believe MIR here is music information retrieval, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the main motivation behind this problem in taking into consideration is mental health of a person. So we all know how frustrating it can be when you can't remember the name of a song or any of the lyrics, but the tune is kind of stuck in your head. This problem, often referred to as earworm, a very well-known problem, it's a very irritating phenomena, also known as stuck song syndrome. So several research has been done, and you will feel surprised that 92% of the population regularly experience earworm. Out of them, 15% of people find their earworms disturbing, while 33% of the people describe their earworms unpleasant. This statistics is found in a paper on dissecting an earworms by University of London. The main point is that not all stuck songs are benign, but when there is a earworm which lasts more than 24 hours, then it might cause a problem, which sometimes leads to obsessive compulsive disorder, psychotic syndromes, or more often migraine headache. Next slide, please. So the question is, what is the solution? Well, there are some solutions. First is scramble and anagram. In a Western Washington University study, participants did puzzle to try to cure their earworms, and 5-letter anagrams worked very best. Second is Stringham, which helps to relax your subvocal articulators. Third is listening to other songs that wouldn't stick. Fourth is solving a Sudoku puzzle with optimum difficulty level. And fifth is, why don't you play that song? Some people insist that best way to deal with an annoying snippet of music is to listen to the offending tune of it entirely. Next slide, please. So our problem statement is, we are proposing a search system for vocalized melody which can be hummed or whistle version of its song, or the user can mimic the instrumental rhythm based upon intra-song or intermodal information retrieval. So the basic idea about this, that the user is not required to either know the lyrics and the artist name. They can just hum, whistle, or sing a melody, or can provide a vocalized instrumental version of that songs to the proposed system. Now, Priya will tell you more about this.
Yeah. So next, please. We would look at some of the challenges that we would face while implementing such a thing. So first is that when the user is humming, so it won't be a studio recording. So some ungovernable factors like environmental noise or the hardware quality of microphone so we also need to take into account that. So our model needs to be robust to this. Second is that for most of the audio tasks, spectrograms are used. So you can see the example of a spectrogram here in the slide. So you can see in humming, the frequencies are more concentrated in the lower region. But while for the same song studio recording, it's not. So it's hard to match this. So if we want to have a search system, we need to match these things. Second is biometric factors. Like every person will have a different voice, different pitch, different voice timbre, different intensity. So our model needs to be robust to that also. Then there is training data. So I believe that training data problem is common for all deep learning models. But what makes this particularly hard is that we cannot generate a completely synthetic data set. Because as the name suggests, we would need human voice for the vocalized melody to make it sound more natural. Okay, and the last is, okay, so the current state of the art system is limited in terms of including instrumental rhythms mimication. So for example, vocal percussion. Vocal percussion is about the instruments that are struck. For example, drumming sounds or tabla bowls. So if current state of the art system, so if a user does vocal percussion like beatboxing, the current system is not able to give good matches. Next, please. Yeah, so current state of the art system is Google's Hum2 search. You might have used it. It's like directly available on our mobile phones. So let me brief how it works. So the left part is how, okay, so the first challenge was training data. So how they generated a semi-synthetic data set from a sung audio. So sung audio is basically it's a collection of people singing the audio with lyrics. So we need to convert it into hum song without lyrics, without the vocals, I mean. So what they do is they applied a SPICE model. SPICE stands for self-supervised pitch estimation. So the analog signal, the audio, is converted to discrete values, pitch values. So relative pitch from the audios are extracted, and those pitch values are then given to a tone generator, which would basically just convert it into humming, like kind of sounds. So that is how a hummed audio is generated. Then the hummed audio, now I'm coming to the right part, hummed audio and the aligned, basically time aligned recorded actual song, both are given to a DNN. So this is kind of a representation learning. So like as sir was talking about in today's lecture about textual embeddings, there is no such standard for musical embeddings. So this is representation learning. So it would generate an embedding. So what we want to do here basically is that, let's say a song is there and its remix version is there, its unplugged version is there, etc. So all those embeddings we want to group together. So the loss function there we need to minimize. But let's say there are two completely different, let's say classical song and jazz song. So that group needs to be like far off. So there we need to maximize. So that's how the embeddings need to be grouped. Yeah, and one last thing I would like to mention, that this technology by Google is not open source. So I think it's proprietary to Google. So we collected all this information from the public blogs that are out. Next. Amit, you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Are you able to see the diagram that I'm trying to show? It is a PDF basically.
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Yeah. So basically what the current, as Priya said, what the current state of the art does is, it does not try to categorize what kind of audio it is, and it is trying to basically create same kind of embedding for all the kind of audios that are there. What we are proposing is to add an audio type classification before it, what kind of audio it is. Now, I would just give an example of what all these three things are. One of them is as simple as the vocals, that are the lyrics. Like if I'm singing the song, so it should not be created an embedding. Like it is simpler to just search the lyrics from by extracting the characters, that is from audio speech recognition. Now, there are two different types of instruments that we try to create ourselves. One is pitch variated instrument, another is sound variated instrument. What is a pitch variated instrument is, let's say there is piano, flute, or even trumpets. The sound does not change, but the pitch of that sound changes. That is why we hear the music. That is how we create the music. While in sound variated instruments like like drum set or like tabla or something like that, we try the entire sound of a particular beat or a particular onset is basically changed. Onset is basically start of a particular beat. Yeah. So we try to differentiate between these two things. Our basic, what do I say? Our intuition behind this is, in pitch variated instruments, we just have to see the relative difference between each of the sounds. Let's say if anyone knows music, it would be easier for them to understand that if we want to search up, you can start the Sare Gama Pada Nisa, that are the English, Hindi, the classical bowls in any of the from any of the particular key and not from a particular key. While in English styles, we start from CDA, and those are particularly defined for a key. So these are the same things and can be variated across the entire piano roll. This is an image of a simple piano roll where the right side, where the leftmost column is the piano instrument. The second one that you can see is, these are the different instruments that are there: kick, clap, hi-hat, and snare. Okay, and these things are basic. This thing is basically known as a pattern, or if you might have heard, a drum roll. Okay, so there is an entire sequence which creates the entire drum roll. So we try to first differentiate these things because the second one contains each instrument differently, while the first one contains the same instrument at different pitch levels. Then we try to create embeddings onto that. This is because we try to think we possibly think that these both are different but richer form of separation. We create a similarity evaluator onto this thing, and for the songs that are already present, we find a collector and we find embedding. We basically collect all the embeddings from this of the all the older songs, and when we are evaluating the similarity of the proposed output, and we try to find the similar songs from the already present songs, and try to provide a rank based model. The user the selection of the user of which song it is from the ranked model can be then updated, can then be used to update the embedding patterns from the selection. Coming back to the PPT, now what does this do? It first of all creates in the instrumental it tries to remove instrumental.
Sorry to interrupt. So sorry,
Yeah.
please wrap it up soon, because yeah, we are running out of time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So it basically tries to remove instrumental dependencies, vocal dependencies, and intra-song search, which is the points within the song, and we try to create rich embeddings. Now Shanna will take up.
Okay, so we divided the feasibility in 3 terms. For short term is just the first outcome of this topic. A system that will take the humming audio as an input, create the time pitch graph, and show the best possible math song from the database. To the next slide, please.
So in the midterm feasibility goal, it can be integrated with some music streaming app, so that it can help the user in searching effectively through text or around some song playing around, or just by humming the sound. And also it can be integrated with some AI voice assistant like Alexa or Google that can be used to leverage in search across the platforms. Like in Amazon Fire Stick, we have where you can search from the home screen, and it checks among all the apps and returns the results. So in that sense, it can be integrated with both these things, and the technology can be used in that way. Next slide.
Okay, so finally, in long term, currently this feature works in 20 different languages, and those languages name are not disclosed by the Google yet. But in future, this feature will scale in terms of languages. Second, we'll try to incorporate as many instruments as we can by generalizing the embeddings. So this will help to scale in terms of instruments too. Third, so embeddings for every song will be unique. So we can actually use this uniqueness to search the song in a very large corpus without going manually one by one. So this is as similar as hashing, where embedding can be the key. And the last one, so nowadays models themselves create many things like create paintings, etc. So similarly, in this case, this model will also generate by music by itself, using the bits and pieces of the existing music already fed into the system. Okay, so I guess we are done.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Meet and others. So in the interest of time, please, whoever has any question, please ask in the chat box. But I strongly recommend to ask question to them. So next group, please share your screen. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Sir, it's being disabled.
अभी नहीं दिख रहा है यार. Yeah, I can see now. Thanks.
Yes. Sakshi, you can start.
Okay, so hello, good morning everyone. I am Sakshi Kaushik, and today we as a team are here to discuss about the augmented reality based smart mirror for clothing try-on. Next. We will be covering a brief introduction and the motivation behind the idea, the scope of the system, then the existing system and proposed system, plan of action along with the feasibility of the idea. So the key to effective time management involving technology is multitasking. Anyone in the business or academic world would agree that every second counts in the day. The idea of a smart home is the direction lots of companies are heading, and while the kitchen has been getting lots of attention, the living room has not. The state of innovation currently is to provide more information with less interaction to get it. Clothes shopping has always been about trying on clothes, and this physical act is often a hinder to someone who wants to quickly shop for fittings and style. Here today, we are proposing an AR-based smart mirror for trying on clothes and avoiding the hassle of trial rooms in clothing stores and shopping malls. A device or a platform to make the shopping experience more digital, interactive, and social. The adoption of the technologies will allow us to reach better levels of integration, usability, and the scalability, and to offer new models of interaction, ease of use, and an increasingly personalized, frictionless, and quality of experience for consumers. The smart mirror will show you that information with a voice command or a swipe of a hand. It is the result of brainstorming on how to solve these issues and develop something that is functional as well as a showpiece. Next. So, the primary motivation behind the smart mirror is to improve the quality of life and to provide information to users in the most convenient way possible. It will allow the user to multitask by consuming media while preparing for the day. Ideally, it will save their time by providing different options and customizability without actually trying them in a trial room. To be honest, people usually have to wait for the trial room to get free, which can be avoided with this. The store will also be safe from any kind of inventory damage, and the user will be able to try maximum outfits in less time. In addition, this system would be increasingly beneficial in the current COVID times, providing the customers contactless smart dressing trials and completely avoiding the trials of the same clothes by multiple consumers. Next. About the scope of the problem, the idea is aimed to integrate technology seamlessly into people's life by putting it where everyone's routine eventually collides. The goal of the AR related smart mirror is to increase a user's productivity by saving them time. The user will have a choice of changing an outfit by merely a swipe or a wave gesture. Step in front of the mirrors and they can see themselves in 360-degree from behind, pause, review their try-ons so that they are able to see the previous try-ons without actually going back to the dressing room repeatedly. The lighting can also be adjusted to suit the users and they can see how their outfit might look in a different weather or lighting conditions. The person then views themselves in their particular outfit and can also move around to see different angles. In consumer applications, the core functionality is basically twofold. Be a general informational hub derived from viewing one's reflection as well as augmented with other useful information and provide some style and comfort benefits, in addition to mirror reflectivity and other functions. Okay, so Abhinav will take on from here to explain the existing systems.
Thank you. In the existing system, next slide. So today, the existing system is primarily based on like augmented reality. Like you can create an avatar in the account of the particular website and customize its height, weight, and every other features, hair, style, all that. And over that 3D model of the cloth will be put on. And one other feature is like photo overlapping. The photo is overlapped over the particular photo of yours. Like clothing photo is overlapped over the photo of the client. So we primarily find these two things. Like in India, we have no such features implemented yet, but outside we have seen two other startups like Zkit.me and Style.me. So Zkit.me, like it overlaps the clothing on this photo of the customer. They divide the clothing photo into 80,000 segments, and they further divide the client's photo into 80,000 segments, and they match those 80,000 segments together to customize the look. And the style means digitizes the clothing in 3D, and they render the image using some software like Maya and all. Then they put that image over the virtually over the 3D model, and you can put those over the avatar you create on the account. Amazon has also been working on this thing, but has not been successful yet, and they have not yet implemented publicly. And we have not seen any application like this that we are proposing, like in real time it changes your clothing and all the hairstyling and makeup. Next slide. So here in the Style Me, we have seen the website. Like they propose, they give the model, and you can style everything like face, hairstyle, and the size, all the kind of size, weight, and hair colors, everything, and the cloth. You can the cloth, the 3D imprint of the cloth is put over this avatar. Next, can you play this, please? So this is Zkit Me. The cloth is replaced over the body. They have 80,000 segments. And so this is how it works till now in the existing systems. Okay, now Palla will take over from here.
Yeah, so I'm going to discuss about the system that we are proposing for the given problem. And I would like to first state the overall workflow that we are trying to think about the problem is. We are going to input the data from cameras and sensors into an algorithm, into a machine learning algorithm that will be able to detect different body parts like faces, hands, and arms. And we will then be creating a render of that model. And similarly, we will also have to create the render of clothes that will then be worn by the models that are rendered using the first step. And then we can use garment fitting simulation, and all of this will be done using sensor data that can actually employ the correct length of the body parts. So suppose if your wrist and arms are of like 3 centimeters, 4 centimeters, the LiDAR sensors will actually be able to detect that. With the recent advancements in LiDAR, I think that will be the biggest application that we can have in this field. So coming to the plan of action, our first step will be to develop a smart mirror. It is because that the hardware requirement for the problem that we are trying to solve is quite big, since we will be using a render, of 3D models, and then we will be superimposing them on to actual human bodies in real time. So there will be a high requirement of hardware. Next, it is essential to detect the body, arms, length, and faces, legs and faces. So it will be necessary that we employ good machine learning algorithms to segment body parts and recognize them. For the same, already there has been a lot of work going on in the field, and the latest paper that we actually followed this from was in CVPR 2020. And it actually is able to accomplish this task on 2D images. So this will be our starting point, where we actually start only with the images, and then we move on to like 3D renders and so on. Also, there are other specialized networks like MTCNN and other IEEE paper that we read for this problem that discusses on detection of faces and facial features and other body parts. The second step in the detection of the cloth fitting will be pose detection and key point detection. There are also algorithms for the same, and these are also only applicable on 2D images. So our task will be to apply this on LiDAR data plus the camera data that we can then use to segment the body into different parts, as you can see from the second diagram. Iman, would you like to take from here?
Yeah. Hello, am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the second phase of the setup will be like we can incorporate different kinds of clothes, and that the clothes will be converted into 3D models. Like those clothes will be worn by the 3D models, and the users can see it. And the pieces of the clothes can be superimposed on the human standing in front of the mirror. So if you go to the store And if you want to see that how the cloth will look on it, look on you, so you can just stand in front of the mirror, and you will see that the cloth will be actually superimposed on the 3D model, and you will get an look like you will get to know like how you will look in that cloth. So the third phase of the model is like how to make it a bit usable. Okay, so the first thing is that with the availability of the sensor data, the human can understand the fitting of the cloth. Okay, so there are other sensors like LiDAR and everything. Actually get your height and width accurately, and by that you can get an accurate fitting of your cloth. And the most important thing that I feel is like when you actually shop for clothes on Amazon and Myntra, you see the images of the clothes, but you can't get a very accurate representation of the color. So another important thing that this system will make is like give you an accurate assumption of your colors, so that you can understand more accurately that how you will look in that color. Okay, so the main another thing will be like the color of the clothes and just showing it accurately. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so the fourth phase of deployment. So after the model is made usable, that is, it means like it gives you an accurate assumption of how you will look in the clothes. So the next phase will be like installation of the system in various shopping malls, where the people go and will try on the system. So then the fifth phase of the deployment would be like this LiDAR sensor is actually found in the iPads. So we can actually try to install this system in the iPad, so that the people can actually try on the system from their homes only. So we can transfer the entire system into our phones and devices, and users can get an information about a good fit. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's come to the feasibility. So the existing solutions employ 2D images and use only superimposition instead of actual fitting. Like if we use just superimposition of the cloth images, what will happen is like you will not know about how well the cloth will fit you. Like an t-shirt of XXL size will be pretty similar to a t-shirt of XL size if we use just superimposition. So fitting is like an concern that is to be handled. The short-term feasibility would be to implement the proposed system on smart mirror that can be used in shopping malls and, if possible, even at homes. And the long-term feasibility would be like to install the system on specific devices where LiDAR sensor is present, like in iPads. And if in future the LiDAR sensors comes in like some other smartphones or smart devices, we can also install a system in that on that devices, so that users can get an idea of how the clothes and other things will fit you. So the next slide, please. Okay, so that's all for for our presentation. So are there any questions?
So thanks, Pallav and team. So again, in the interest of time, since we're running out of time. So next group, please share your screen and present. And others, please ask your question over the chat to Pallav and team.
Thank you.
So are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, please go ahead, Harsh.
Good morning. So we are group 42 and our project is basically emotion mining and empath link prediction to prevent social unrest. We'll be doing this using Twitter data during the Indian farmers protest. So the introduction to a like problem statement is that social media plays a very important role in like activities against governments or anyone like protests. So like social media mimics the like real life. So what happens in reality is also portrayed in social media. So the exchange of information of social media has been seen in cases such as the Arab Spring incidents, in which the like in the Arab countries people rebelled, and it is also been seen on social media. Protests can be unproductive or productive and may turn into unrest real soon and may be harmful for citizens. So social media is a very key area which plays an important role in formulation of collective in connective actions, and sentiments form a large shaping factor in these actions. So collective and connective actions are like two social sciences research factors that come into play for protests. So we'll see it later. So what was our motivation? So the recent protest by Indian farmers at Delhi borders against the recent farm laws, the protest was going for a long while in a peaceful manner, but on Republic Day, it suddenly turned into a riot. And you may not have been able to predict it. So what our problem statement is, we want to analyze the emotions and opinions of peoples on the farmers of protest and try to establish the empathy of people in various regions, and further to mathematically predict further activity that can be cause of harm. So we want to use like social media data to predict emotions, so we can predict future social unrest and protest by predicting what the emotions of the people might be. So the existing systems that exist currently, for a literature review, we came across a certain system, Embers, which is like an automated 24/7 continuous system, which monitors like data of like 11 Latin American countries to forecast civil unrest. So they monitor sources such as tweets, news sources, IRS feeds, blogs, economic indicators, etc. So the tweet version of the model uses dynamic query expansion on tweets for predicting social unrest. It uses 4 other models additionally and is empirically evaluated by an independent team continuously. So it's been running since 2012. So the scope of such models in the Indian context in long term can be very like helpful for the country. And another existing model, so this was the like beating news with embers forecasting civil unrest. This was like published in knowledge discovery in like 2014. So another existing model that is primarily using social media data to predict unrest is the recent papers in advances in social networks and analysis. So what this paper does is it mines Twitter data, then it uses LIVIC, that is a package, linguistic inquiry and word count, and it makes features using those. So using those features and machine learning models such as SVM, it tries to predict mobilization, not exactly civil unrest, but mobilization, which is a concept that if a protest is mobilized, people will participate in it and it might result in unrest. So what they do is they classify if the process is being mobilized or not, and they give location and time for that. So after that, they are able to make probabilistic predictions if or not the civil unrest will occur at a certain location. So for that, they utilize data mining and NLP approaches. So when they have classified the mobilization using like logistic regression and other models, they were able to correlate mobilization with the protest that occurs during the 2015 Baltimore protests that were caused due to the like death of Freddie Gray, similar to George Floyd, that happened recently in America. So they were able to like predict the probability of the days of protest with like quite some accuracy. So the major part of the protest was only occurring in Baltimore, but they could also predict it for other cities. So they predicted probabilities for Baltimore, New York City, and San Francisco. So the probabilities for San Francisco were pretty low. So like they predicted that protests would not occur and they did not did. And for Baltimore and New York City, it did. So having a preparedness for the protest would give an advantage to in the Indian context for all the future like civil unrest that might occur. So that is our problem statement and motivation for making our models. So why are we making our own model? So the models that are already there may not work in the Indian context. So mobilization may not be a prerequisite for unrest itself, and location may not be available for calculating mobilization as well. Less than 10% of Twitter users associate a location with their tweets whenever they tweet, and it is even less for India. So what we propose is, and what is our novelty is our problem statement is an engineering problem for knowledge discovery using data mining. So what we do is we do psychometric analysis and topic classification for predicting emotions and unrest. So we use a Livik-like approach, but we do not exactly use Livik. And after that, we generate features using Livik and Twitter and government data. So whatever the government is responding to, whatever is happening to this certain topic on Twitter itself. So this is the graphical abstract for our overall approach. So we use Twitter, we scrape old tweets using SNS scrape. We collect pre-processing, we collect and pre-process tweets. We do Livik-like analysis, psychometric and Livik-like analysis to make features out of those tweets. Then we train a machine learning model on that, and then we identify as on a web page or a web app type thing. We identify top new trending tweets, and we retrieve the live tweets. And
so Harsh, please wrap it soon.
Yeah, so we do the similar psychometric analysis.
Presentation, please.
Yeah.
No, please carry on. I mean to say, yeah. So
I'll
we
be
have
wrapping
given
up
10
soon.
minutes
It's
to
not
everyone.
long after
Yeah,
this.
please.
So we do similar empath feature making on that, train a machine learning, test the machine learning model, and feed the old, append the old new data to the old data. So what we plan to make is a kind of a dashboard that would be able to predict real-time tweets, and it would flag tweets that might be inciting a civil unrest, or might be going towards inciting a civil unrest, and the probability that a civil unrest might happen. So this is a kind of a sample UI that we may have. So what we are doing, so data mining is our first step. We collect Twitter data using SNS scrape. We use 3 approaches: content-based approach, location-based approach, and user-based queries. So content-based query, we use the most trending and most popular hashtag for each Indian state and extract the tweets using those hashtags. For the farmers protest, we have collected 4 lakhs plus tweets from February and March. In location-based queries, I was talking about earlier, less than 10% of tweets have a location associated with them. So a newer location query may not have same number of tweets associated as just a content-based query. So a content-based query, for that we had 4 lakh plus tweets overall. For location-based query, collectively, if I just search for Delhi, I have just 7,000 tweets associated with location. So what we did, we collected the user data for whatever the 4 lakh tweets we have. We have around 90,000 unique user data. We performed in-entity extraction on user location bio to identify possible locations and identify with the tweet. So using user data, we were able to estimate roughly at a country level location of up to 1.4 lakh tweets, but still 2.5 lakh tweets have no estimated location. So for modeling, we use Empath, which is a recent Stanford paper at CHI. It is a singular linguistic model such as Livik. It classifies text across lexical categories. It made the categories using using word to embedding. So it mined 600K fiction stories and just made the word embeddings and classified like 200 plus similar categories. So it is a dictionary based a topic classification model similar to Livik. The Pearson correlation versus Livik is 0.906, which is very high. So instead of Livik, we will be using Empath. And on top of Empath, we'll be generating features from Empath, and we'll be taking government responses through news and their official Twitter feeds and converting them to doc2vec embeddings. Using the Empath features and doc2vec embeddings, we will make ML models to one, regress future emotions, and two, predict if the unrest is going to happen at a certain time interval. So we are aware of some of our own limitations that the lexicons present maybe like majorly times false positives or negatives. So it and at a higher level, the kind of emotions available in Empath are more than Livik, but they are still predefined or dictionary based, and it might not be right balance of breadth. We recognize those limitations and are working to improve them. And the major limitations that we all also observed were user do not use location on their tweets, and the data that Empath is trained on is fiction, and we are analyzing it on tweets. So it might be not fit or same thing as the breadth and that of thing. We recognize that sarcasm in tweets exists, and we also recognize that training our own vector space model for Livik categories may offer some advantage, but we are not going for it right now for feasibility. So we have some initial results. So data mining for top users by count and distribution, we can see that only few most of the users have very few post count. So a mean set of 4 lakh users only had 4 tweets or something. So it is a very less tweet count that people are making. So they're just making account for doing this tweets. And for data mining, we were able to roughly locate the data. So no location is still around 2.5 lakhs, but we were able to make further classify by location. So India, New Delhi, Toronto. So we were able to better classify location using name identity recognition of user data and the location distribution by tweet. So by average, every location have 27 tweets. So a lot of unnamed villages are also there. So the emotions that we see and the emotional empath categories here distributed across February and March. So these were some initial results for the modeling. After that, our next step is training the machine learning models. So the discussion about future and feasibility of our app. So basically, our app is aimed to prevent or provide an warning for future civil unrest that might happen through social media. On a short-term basis, this has a very high applications towards the farmers' protest and identifying that the future exactly the civil unrest that come may not be at a short time without warning. And we could also reverse retrieve users with most effect on sentiments, that is negative effects that might be inciters in a unrest. On a long-term note of the feasibility, this kind of model on a long term may go a long way for the police and the government of India to better have a sense of security and better be able to predict civil unrest throughout the nation. So that is the summary of our presentation. Thank you. I'm open to any questions that you guys might have.
So thanks, Harsh. Any questions from, the students who are still here? Thank you so much again for staying so late despite it's much over time. Anyone?
Yes, sir. I tried to wrap it up fast. So
no issue. No, it's not. That's fine. Okay, so given the time frame, I think so. Let's wrap it up here. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.